as we move through this webinar, as a reminder to everyone, if you have questions for Matt as we go forward, and it makes sense to interrupt, we have a small enough group to where it's okay if you see an opportunity to ask him a question. Obviously, if that's okay with you too, Matt. Otherwise, you could just post them in the chat, and then I'll make sure they're asked at some point. Or, of course, you could always hold them to the end. But I guess I should introduce you first, Matt. Matt Beaudet, he is the acting buildings commissioner in the city of Chicago. So a very different perspective than what we had last week with private practice and with Mike and Bob at Higgins and Branchow. Here we have the opposite side, the public side, in regulating development and buildings throughout the city of Chicago. And I think this will be a really great webinar and a great opportunity to learn a lot about a very different career path as opposed to our last guest. So without further ado, Matt, if you want to just let our team know a little bit more about yourself, and then we can go from there.
Sure, great. Thanks for having me here. Thanks for Aaron for suggesting to you that I be able to address your group. So I'm Matt Beaudet, acting building commissioner. I've got a confirmation hearing on October the 6th, and hopefully that will go well. All the city commissioners are confirmed by the city council. So hopefully that will go well. And I've been here 11 years already, or 9 years, sorry. 11 years since I came back to the city, but 9 years with the building department. I've been the first deputy building commissioner since 2011. And worked with 3 other commissioners besides myself here. So I've had a variety of commissioners I work with. 2 of them were attorneys. So that's always been very helpful. Prior to that, I was the first deputy health commissioner for the city of Chicago. And, I was lucky enough to get this job right when COVID hit. I got the health job right when H1N1 hit, and that commissioner was leaving. So I had some fun with that pandemic as well. Prior to that was at the Central Management Services for the state of Illinois. So that is a big giant monster where we did property management, we did IT at the time, personnel, procurement, and all the facility managements for every state facility, from the Thompson Center down to a little shack down in Hardin County, Illinois. So that's been a wide variety. And prior to that, I was with the Illinois Tollway, and we came on the tollway right when it needed to be completely redone. So 275 miles of tollway, and also converting it to electronic tollway at the same time. And prior to that was with the city of Chicago again. So my second tour of duty with the city, and that was administrative hearings, where Mayor Daley took all of the ordinance violations out of the circuit court. A lot of you are too young to remember, but you used to go to circuit court, and it was actually in the traffic court building at the time across the river. And back then they would call up about 50 cases at once. So they would just call your name up. It was a cattle call. And then they would just say, okay, dismissed. So your punishment was taking the hour or 2 off from work to do that. Many times people would volunteer to go for you. So you wouldn't even have to go. Someone would just they'd say Matt Beaudet, and then someone would say, oh yeah, that's me. And they would just throw those cases out in mass. And what the Mayor Daley at the time, what he didn't like about that is, these were small cases in the judge's eyes. So overflowing dumpsters, people urinating on the public way, some building court cases as well. And they were just being thrown out, and nothing was ever being fixed on them. So it was a cost of doing business for a business to sell outdated baby food and the likes. And he really wanted to address quality of life issues with the city, because as you know, once those start to fester, they usually grow into bigger problems. So it was the broken windows theory that, one bad, and that applies to where I'm at now. One bad house can take down an entire block. And prior to that, did some time with the county, and was with the chief judge's office there for a couple years. And interesting enough, started out in the Cook County Law Library. So not a prime job you would think coming out of law school. But at the time, Jack O'Malley, who was a Republican, was just elected state's attorney. And instead of relying on the state's attorneys for legal advice, they started putting lawyers in various other county departments and going de facto for us for advice. So if I can actually go back to law school where you guys are at now, when I was in your shoes, I thought I was going to be an international attorney. So I did the summer semester at Oxford University in England. And then I was interning with the State Attorney's Office my last year. And I could have the choice of going into the State Attorney's Office or going on an international law program. And I chose the law program. So I studied over at Salzburg University for about 3 months and then did a 6-month stint at a law firm in England. So it was formerly Edge and Ellison in Birmingham, England. And it was a large international law firm. So I just pictured myself as bouncing between the States and Europe, coming out of law school and having that as a career. So when I got back home to the States, I found out that, all the law firms around here, they're like, yeah, you can do that, but that's 10 years away, kid. So, do 10 years in the firm, doing whatever assignment we give you, and then maybe you can touch some international law in a decade or so. So that kind of threw me for a while. So I just happened to get into government in that regards. I never thought I'd stay here 30 years later, but it was something that I enjoyed, the public service aspect of it. And what I told Aaron and a lot of the mayoral fellows is what I tell everybody, from high school kids when I do career days to college students to law students, is that, and my own 2 children, which maybe they'll listen and maybe they won't, but I always thought a law degree is the best degree to have. And that's because I think it's the most flexible. So anytime you're involved in any type of analytics for a problem and problem solving and seeing both sides of an issue, which we're trained to do in law school, that carries over into so many different fields. So even though I started out kind of down the law path, that path kind of broke away when I was asked to go out to the tollway. And at the time, that's right when Governor Blagojevich took over office. So the tollway has always been kind of the DuPage County Republican bastion. They didn't even like the other Republicans that were from the rest of the state. We kind of treated them a little bit better when we got there. And it was kind of they're kind of grateful for it. But it was really, and the whole team that was sent out there, most of them were attorneys. So, Jack Hartman, who was running the airport at the time, was an attorney, or he's a deputy over at the O'Hare Airport at Aviation. He was doing that. Marilyn Johnson, who became a judge later, was general counsel for the Chicago Public School System. So what he really did is assemble a team of people he thought could solve a problem, which is heavily based on attorneys. So when we got out there and started unraveling the tollway and finding out we needed to rebuild the entire system, not only do that, but make it electronic. They were probably at 10% electronic toll collection when we got there. And when I left, they were probably at 60. So it completely flipped the paradigm. And a lot of the interesting stories there is so the tollway's always been run by engineers. So the mindset is it's road work, it's road construction, it's operation of traffic. It's right up in an engineer's alley. So when we got there, like what our bunch of lawyers going to do, and we gave them our plan. Our plan was to go electronic in 5 years, which they laughed at. They said, no, it's probably off 15 years. And then that got accelerated because the governor's like, I love the idea, but do it in 2 years because I've got to run for re-election in 4 years. So, we walked around the country, checked out best practices, and we're kind of laughed at by the other toll agencies that were run by engineers. And turns out we just did it. And really, the way we did it, we just kept asking why, which is what all of you are trained to do. You're trained to, whenever you're faced with an issue, it's ask why, or a solution, you ask why, or this is the precedent at the time. Well, you don't always just follow it, because then we'd be following 1,800 Supreme Court cases that were wrong at the time and are wrong now, and just keep asking why. And that's probably the best advice I can have for all of you as you go through your careers, is always ask why. So at the tollway, we kept asking why. Why can't you build in the wintertime? Oh, well, the engineer Bible says, once you hit November, you shut down operations. Well, why is that? Is that because the asphalt plant shut down? And then why don't we just bring the asphalt plants to us and put them on the side of the road, which we did. So we kept going construction full blown. They said, well, you can't pour asphalt in cold weather. I'm like, well, again, why? The Canadians do it, the Russians do it, the Scandinavians do it. Let's ask them. And something as simple as, one time we wanted to open up a plaza with the governor in January, and they came back and said, well, we're sorry, we can't stripe the roads. And again, it's like, well, why can't you stripe the roads? Well, it's too cold. I'm like, well, again, they stripe the roads somewhere where it's cold. So we reached up to Saskatchewan, Canada, and found out that there is a machine that they have that heats the pavement, lays down the striping, and then comes back and heats it again, and it sticks just as well as if you did it in the spring. So that was really a lot of the things that we did there. And when I got there too, I did the violation system, and they had a 4-year backlog. And the reason they did that is that they scheduled hearings 20 minutes at a time, or half an hour out each time. So, you would know it if you were in the know. Just ask for a hearing and you'll get one in 2 years. So, coming from the legal background here, I'm like, well, I used to do drug cases, 200 drug cases on a single call. It's like, I can do 200 toll violations on a single call. So it's very simple. You call, instead of repeating the opening statement 8 times per day, you do it twice. You have a morning and afternoon call, and you lay out, here's the opening statement of the judge, the hearing officers at the time. And this is what's a defense. This is what's not a defense. So, if you got one that's not a defense, it's not going to work. And, a lot of people just end up paying the tolls that way, paying the fines. And we were just moving the cases through like crazy. And other instances where I've, again, asked the question why was when I came to the health department. Mayor Daley brought me back. It was, again, the commissioner at the time was on his way out. So he had one foot out the door already, and then H1N1 hit. So I was kind of left there to handle that. And the doctors and nurses are great at the department, but they didn't know how to run a mass vaccination operation. So, just being a lawyer, thinking outside the box and using all the tools that we have. I've got 6 city colleges in the city. They've got cafeterias, they've got gymnasiums. I got the Red Cross. CPD can help me with crowd control. So we're just going to set up mass vaccination sites. And we were one of the few cities that did it correctly because we didn't do it the hospital way. We did it, the problem-solving way. Is you've got a large group of people that need a vaccination quickly. We had the vaccinations, and we had a distribution system for it. So that worked out well. And when I came to the building department, as I told Aaron and the mayoral fellows, when I got here, we had garbage cans that were filled with the blueprints, the old drawings, and we'd literally roll them from desk to desk. And the electrician couldn't see it until the carpenter saw it, and the plumber couldn't see it until the electrician was done. They would get lost. They couldn't draw on the actual plans. They had to write little notes, which got lost themselves or were hard to interpret once they were sent back to the architect. And it just was not an efficient system. But again, it's one that every architect has been used to forever. So, the commissioner at the time was another attorney, and we're like, well, we've got to make this system better. So we brought an electronic review system in. It had some bumps, but we got through it. And I think that's one key to telling people is when you bring in something new, there are going to be bumps, but you are going to get through it. Everybody along the way freaked out in everything we've done, from the tollway to the health department, to the building department, because it just was not the way it was done before. So what do you do with 2,000 architects that aren't used to this system? You partner with the American Architect Institute of Chicago and you train them. So again, if we need to have mass training programs, we'll do it. If we need to tape them, we'll do it. And we had it out there. And now everyone loves that system because every reviewer can look at it at the same time. So you're not waiting for 5 or 6 disciplines to wait their time in queue. The design professional, architects and engineers get the corrections back automatically at the same time that the reviewer enters them, so they can start working on it. And you literally shave 2/3 time off permits. And you get better permits because you've got drawings that everybody understands. So it's been fun. It's and I tell everybody, I never thought I'd be building roads. I never thought I'd be working on economic development for skyscrapers in the city, or for affordable housing, or doing mass vaccinations of people during a pandemic, and then transferring those skills to trying to manage this pandemic as well. But it really does, the law degree really does open up avenues. And I always said government opens up a lot of avenues too, because government's one of the few industries where you can bounce around like this. And I have friends that are accountants that they hate the job that they're in, but they're like, well, I'm an accountant, that's what I do. And they bounce from accountant firm to accountant firm, or from tax department to tax department. I'm like, that's a good degree too. Why don't you break the mold and do something else? You can do so much more with any degree that deals with analytics and communication, which is the key, because you can have great ideas, but you can't articulate them, or you can't get buy-in from people, and you're really not going to be able to do anything. And that's what the law degree, the 2 things that it teaches you is how to think quick on your feet, how to communicate, how to come up with innovative ideas. And it's really been fun, and you meet some interesting people along the way. It's like when I was at administrative hearings, I drew up the state bill. I think it was Senate Bill 574 in the 90th General Assembly. And that was to allow the city, under our home rule powers, to do administrative hearings. We could do it, we could do it under our home rule powers, but we also wanted some statutory powers, because at the time there were 5 or 6 different statutes out there, one for sanitation violations, one for buildings, one for parking, and then a bunch of home rule items. And depending on where you prosecuted that ticket, your times for hearings, your times for decisions, everything, your fines were all over the board. So it really didn't make sense to have all these different statutes that we had to follow. So we just consolidated into one state statute. But the interesting thing there is when I wrote it, it's, as you know, you need either a representative or a senator to actually introduce it and sponsor it and walk it through the process. So the bill I wrote, they came back to me one day and said, "Oh, great, we've got a sponsor for you." I'm like, "Good." I'm thinking all the big names that are in the Senate at the time. And like, "No, it's some new guy." I'm like, "You're giving my bill to a new guy?" It's like, "Who is he?" He's like, "Oh, it's Barack Obama." I'm like, "Who is he?" Like, it's like, and now he says the same thing about me now. But it's really interesting that when you get to write law too, that sometimes a tiny bill like that gets sponsored by the future president. So I've been able to, still in the legal profession, still write a lot. I wrote a nickel chapter on administrative adjudication. I wrote that probably 20 years ago, but every 2 years you get to rewrite it. I've been able to teach at the National Judicial College out in Reno, Nevada. Teach college courses, and it's really been fun. It's been a rewarding career. I'll leave fully pensioned, and if a good springboard to be picked up by a law firm or picked up by an engineering firm or a consulting firm. But it's been good and rewarding. And any questions along the way you have regarding real estate or?
Yeah, Matt, I have a question. You mentioned the avenues that open up with the law degree. So what's kept you on the government path, since it sounds like you've had anything but a linear path within government, but it has ultimately all been within government. So what's kept you within the realm?
Really just the opportunity to expand into different areas. So the closest I probably came to leaving was when I was at the tollway. And there was a large international engineering firm that wanted to hire me out from there. At the time, I just had my son, my second child. He was just born. My daughter was like 2 years old, and at the time, it didn't feel right to be to go private at that time, because it was a great job. It would have been very rewarding, but it would have been, you're doing 3 months in Florida, then you're doing 6 months in Texas, or maybe even going overseas. And it just wasn't the right time at that time. Now they came back. Both of mine are, my son's a senior, my daughter's a sophomore in college. So now would be a good time to go. But at the time, even then, it's like, if I would have done that, I probably would have been in the toll industry the last 15 years. And, it's a nice industry to be in, but it can be tired. You can get tired of anything. So, I kind of like, maybe I've got some career ADD or something, but I like to move around. This is the longest I've been anywhere, to be honest with you. Was 9 years in the building department is the longest I've been somewhere.
What did that switch from health to buildings look like? It sounds like it'd be drastically different, but I'd definitely love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah. So you just, what I found is you take the skill sets you have with you at each place. So when I was at the health department, I never really considered, running it as a health department. I just wanted to run it as a good, efficient agency, and just happen to provide health services in that role. As the tollway, I never fancied myself an engineer, a road engineer, or an IT specialist, but I ran it as an efficient agency, and that's just happened to provide those services. And the same for buildings. Buildings is the economic engine of the city right now, or it has been for a long time. We bring in a ton more money than we spend. We're one of the few agencies that does that. So that allows us to also provide police and fire protection for the city and health services. But yeah, I really like when I go somewhere, I like to, find out how I can improve the services and how can I grow the services. And in this role, how can I partner the services? So one idea I have right now, it's kind of what you guys are doing in law school. When I was there, is read books, take a test, and you might do a trial ad your last year. But I'm envious of you guys because you guys get to do clinics, you get to do all these other things. You actually get to practice law or see law being practiced. And with the building department, I want to try to do that with the architectural community. So what I've seen here, not for the bigger projects, but for the smaller projects that we need to address too in the neighborhoods, is they can afford the building permits next to nothing. They can get a deal from a contractor. But where they run into the big buzzsaws when they get a $2,000 or $5,000 architect bill, which they just can't absorb. So what happens then is they use a lot of unlicensed contractors, and they get what they pay for. And rather than get them economically on the permit end, I see them on the back end on the enforcement end. And by that time, they're the work that's been done, it's either incomplete or it's not up to code and it's not safe. And they're tearing that out and redoing it. So I want to try to partner more with the private sector, which is something I've kind of done in all the places I know government's never the answer to everything. I know sometimes people make that mistake and just saying, well, the government's gonna fix it and we don't want any outsiders telling us how to do it. But I've always worked close with engineers and doctors, the hospitals during H1N1, work closely with them, the AMA, engineers at the tollway, and here with the design professionals and developers, really make them part of the equation to bring economic development to the city, and be more of a partner, not a government bureaucrat with them. As the mayor likes to say, don't get in people's way. Help them get to where they need to get to. And that I think actually being a lawyer too kind of helps you because you're trained to see both sides. I mean, a good lawyer is the best one to take apart his or her own argument, because if they can't do that, then they're going to have trouble presenting their case. So you need to know where all the twists and turns are. You need to get buy-in from a client or a jury or a judge. So you need to have that skill set, and it works out very well in this role, is because I can go fall back on those skills I learned in school and over 30 years, and get through issues and get through roadblocks and come up with solutions. I know when I met with Aaron's group, they're like, what do you do with the bad actors? So bad developers, bad contractors, bad architects. And as you know, pulling somebody's license is extremely difficult. You got that little due process clause in the Constitution that, gets in the way sometimes. So, and some of these we don't license, are licensed by the state, like architects. So what we've done is come up with a, creative solution where I'm just not going to give you any permits. So no, I haven't suspended your license. You can still work. You just can't pull new permits, which is the only way to really get these folks to clean up their act. Because what happens is you'll get an architect that literally has 100 open projects, and no big firm even has that close to that many. So what this person does is goes from person to person and collects the down payment for doing the drawings, and then never does them. And the same with contractors. You'll get contractors that will just start the job and never finish it and just keep moving on to the next one. So rather than spend a year or so trying to pull their license, and meanwhile they're out doing the exact same thing, wreaking havoc in the community, I just stopped them from pulling permits, which is their lifeblood. And once you affect them that way, they either pack up and go somewhere else, or they actually clean up their act, which is what we want them to do.
Then Matt, it looks like we have a couple questions.
Yeah.
One from Aaron. Aaron, you still have a question?
Yes, I do. Hi, Matt. I think in talking with a few city officials this summer, the diversity of the roles that you've had is really interesting. And I feel like what you said about like career ADD sort of resonated with me in terms of I just have a lot of interest. I really have enjoyed law school in a variety of ways. And I was just wondering, you know, beyond the skills that it takes to move between departments or between jobs, what kinds of conversations have you had to allow you to not get pigeonholed? I think, like, is it a strategic like networking plan, or is it more organic for you to have those conversations with people to kind of get where you're looking to go?
I think it's a great question. I think it's a little bit of both. So, and I drive some of my colleagues crazy because I'm the one that goes in the room and talks about anything but buildings. So we're in these large meetings, and you know, I'll talk about transportation. Did you think about how this is going to impact transportation, or did you think about how this is going to impact you know, business viability? And I think from that, people understand that if you go in and you start talking big picture, you're not going to be pigeonholed, because they're going to think of when they are looking for other openings somewhere, they're going to say, well, what about the person that, you know, brought up this idea at the meeting, or was thought enough to bring up that, hey, this is going to be an issue for something, not for me, but for somebody else. And if you start working that in a lot, people see that. Yes, sometimes they're annoyed by it, but other times they're, they appreciate it in the back of their mind, and it kind of sticks. And that's when, they may be the one that goes somewhere else, and they're the ones that take you with them. I've never worked with my friend Jack, who ran the tollway, but he knew me, he knew of me. And when he moved over the tollway, he's like, you're one of the guys that kind of people I want to take with me. I want to bring in, people that aren't afraid to speak their mind. I say I don't so much complain or criticize, but I will point out where there are some pitfalls, but I also have solutions for it. So, don't just point out that this is going to cause a transportation problem. Point out why it causes a transportation problem, and if there are some solutions to it, then there are. But if not, then we may need to think of a different way of doing it.
And then we have another question from Hannah.
Hi, Matt. My name's Hannah. I'm a 1L. So you touched a little bit on like public-private partnerships, and that you guys also focus a little bit on like affordable housing. So I'm wondering what your relationship is like with developers, because I know maybe there's like a little tension between like affordable housing developers and the city, with like getting permits and stuff like that. So could you just describe a little bit like what your relationship is like with them, and how you guys kind of help each other out?
Sure, it's a great question. I have a very good relationship with the developers. Both myself and my predecessor, Judy Friedland, who was an attorney too, and she used to prosecute housing court cases. We're kind of the same in that we think of ways to get things done and get solutions. And affordable housing is a great example, because everybody wants affordable housing, but sometimes you have to manage the expectations of the advocates and the developers, and sometimes come up in the middle where neither group is happy. which is usually a sign that you've done something right. And this is where I get in trouble at some meetings, because I'll veer into the housing regulations, and some of them that are really written by policy folks, not attorneys or practitioners, and they're all well-meaning, but sometimes they make affordable housing unaffordable. So there were some regs that said that a affordable unit needed to be larger than a market rate unit in square footage, and needed to have more plumbing fixtures. And if you had affordable housing, you had to provide a shaded play area. And all of that adds up. And it adds up to the point where a project's no longer affordable. So you can't make affordable housing so costly and cost more beyond the market rate. You can't do that, because no one's going to build it. We had developers that came to us and said, these new regulations, and these are people that build affordable housing and want to continue to, but they would just say these regulations are knocking all these projects out of the box. And I have the same discussion with the sustainability folks. I understand why we need energy efficiency and why we need some more sustainability, but we can't make it where you can't build anything, and it gets too costly to build. I mentioned to Aaron, I call these the 1% meetings. So I go from one meeting and they're like, we need to have every roof needs to be built for future solar panels. It's only going to add 1% to the construction cost. And then another meeting will be, well, we need to make sure all garages are EV ready, for electrical vehicles. We need to run a stronger electrical service out to the garages. That's only going to add 1% to the construction cost. And you keep going down this path where you meet with all these various groups that have all great ideas, and it's things we should explore. But once you start mandating them, you start adding onto the cost of construction to the point where at the end of the month, you're 6%, 10% higher in construction cost. And all you're doing is driving those projects out to the suburbs or somewhere else. So what you have to do is really create a balance between the various competing groups.
On that note, do you have anything planned in relation to affordable housing? Any changes that the buildings department can make? You mentioned that it's kind of more of a policy side thing. Is there something that you can do about it in the meantime, besides obviously trying to be kind of a liaison for these parties?
Yeah, well, what we've done is we've August 1st, our new building code came into effect, and that was last really updated in 70 years ago, even before the first Mayor Daley. So it's been that long. And when we redid the code, we, the building department, really wanted to make sure that we made it affordable. So we took in a lot of innovations. One example is PVC piping versus cast iron piping. Now, the plumbers union is not happy about PVC piping because they like cast iron, there's just certain things that you've got to do trade-offs with. We've done trade-offs with the electrical union. There's some things in the electrical code that they didn't like, but it was cost-effective and it was safe, and we just had to do that. You got to lower the cost. You've got to make the building code, like our word, builder friendly. And the building code is really just a floor. It's not a ceiling. So these are the minimum requirements you need to meet. So if somebody else wants to build higher and above it, God bless them. I always say I got to be careful not to have the building code for the Sterling Bays or the Midwest related to the world who will put all the bells and whistles in their projects, because it doesn't work on the south side, the west side, doesn't work in Cragen Park. So you can't have the gold-plated building code and still have economic development outside of the loop area. So that's and we get a lot of groups that says, oh, you should have this, you should have that in the code, and my job is always to make the code affordable. And so if we make the code affordable, then we're going to spur economic development. People are going to fix their houses up. We can't have these mandates that if I've got a 100-year-old house and I want to upgrade something, that I have to upgrade the entire house now to the new code, because then no one's people aren't going to upgrade it again, and it's going to start to deteriorate, or they're going to have unlicensed contractors in there doing work without permits because they don't want to, they want to fix something for $5,000 in the house. They don't want to have to pour in another $50,000, making the roof solar panel ready. So, and we actually did align this with the international building codes. So we were the last major city to be on our own. And again, that was, we got a lot of buy-in from the outside folks on this and private sector, and some pushback because, some people like that Chicago Code is basically written in its own language because that gives them an advantage. But we really needed to have outside firms coming in here too, and outside development and contractors, if we're going to be pulling in a lot of outside investment. One example is Malcolm X College. When they built the entire new one from the ground up, they had a firm out of Atlanta who's built colleges all around the country. And as soon as they came in here and they got the job, they were kind of freaking out because the code was in a completely different language. And we had to have weekly meetings with them to get them through the process, which I was happy to do because we needed to get that college open. But for me, that was really an extra eye opener that, we need to have a code that the rest of the country understands and can come in and use. And still, it doesn't mean we're going to go by Chicago-centric needs, because the National Building Code is very good, but it's not written for urban density like here in New York. So there are some Chicago things that we need to keep here, especially given our history with fire. But you move along. You try to keep the help keep the train moving.
And then Matt, Erin just posted a question. She's asking about how Mayor Lightfoot has focused heavily on equity-based policy approaches in her time as mayor. Does the buildings department have any procedural ideas for making upfront costs or enforcement fees more equitable across diverse actors?
That's a great question too. We really don't do major fines. We do them for some of the bad folks, but the one nice part about the building code is if we go to circuit court or administrative hearings, is that compliance is a defense. So, maybe for some other departments, a fine is appropriate, but we found that fines really don't fix the problems that we need to fix. Because if I fine you $1,000 and your roof is still has a hole in it, and you're renting it out to somebody, that doesn't do any good. Or if we fine you for inadequate heat, and the tenant still doesn't have heat, that doesn't help anybody. So we work very closely with folks. We'll help them get permits, and move along that way. For some really bad folks, yeah, we'll fine them, but we really don't want to do those types of big fines. Again, we want you to fix it, and we really don't want to fine you. One thing I have raised with the city, and I know the mayor is interested in this too, is right now the code says if you owe the city money, you can't get permits, you can't get services, licenses, and we're finding a lot of folks that had a inspection fee from 5 years ago for $40, and now with all the penalties, it's like $400. So I've always told our finance department, I'm fine with just getting the $40. I'd rather get something than nothing, because you're never going to get that $400. And meanwhile, if they can't get a permit, again, they're just going to hire an unlicensed person and do it. So a lot of these progressive fines and late fees and what have you, I've never been a big fan of them, because I basically see it doesn't work for the building department. And it stops people from actually doing what we need them to do.
On a somewhat related note, I have a couple questions from folks who couldn't make it. Someone's asking, what are some challenges you've encountered in the field? I know you've talked about a few just with kind of day-to-day struggles that you're always going to have to deal with, but is there anything else maybe that you haven't already talked about?
Really big design flaws is a struggle. We've got one now, I won't mention the address, but they've built some duplexes and some high rises that the fire department are really not happy with, as far as having a second means of egress out of the building or out of the corridor. So you do run into some very big design flaws. You run into some projects that start and they don't finish, but unfortunately it's an 80-story building and they've already done 20. And those are the ones that are difficult to deal with, because you've got to do something with those buildings. On the smaller side, vacant buildings are always still a very big challenge. And not so much because people don't want to take care of them. And I saw this in the last foreclosure debate. People automatically think that banks own all these buildings or that they all have mortgages. And the reality is, a lot of the vacant buildings here, it's the owner has passed away and either it has no heirs or the heirs don't want the property, and it just sits there and deteriorates. And it's hard for us to do anything with that. We do have to go into court. The courts are very lenient, even towards absentee owners. And that's been a real struggle. That's when we've been trying to find out how to deal with these. They're ghost properties, basically. Nobody owns it. Nobody maintains it. You've got a lot of non-for-profits that want to take them, but then they don't have the resources to rehab them. And it's, that one's always hard.
And then Christian just asked a question, with the pandemic, have you found that there has not been as much activity in the city with regards to building and renovating buildings?
We've still had a lot of activity. So we, to the mayor's credit, we never shut down. So New York and some of the other cities basically stopped construction cold. We didn't do that because, again, that's an economic development in the city. And, leaving unfinished projects is dangerous in and of itself. So, especially if it's exposed to the elements. So we wanted to keep everything going, which we did. So we kept our permits going. We do that remotely now. Our staff is working from home, most of them. Fortunately, we had that other system in place where we can review drawings online. So we've just been able to upgrade some folks' computers at home and get them working on the system. Our inspectors are still out doing inspections. We probably do expect to see a big shift from new construction to renovation. And this is where it's really getting tricky, because the way the industry was going, the real estate industry, you had the co-working was becoming really huge. Co-living was becoming real huge. People liked living in high rises downtown. We were building more student dormitories in the South Loop. And now everything's flipped on its head. Nobody wants to be in high rises. Nobody wants to do co-working. Nobody wants to do co-living because you don't want to live with someone you don't know. Even some of the affordable units where you you're looking to redo your basement or your second floor and turn that into a rental property, you're really leery of having somebody in your house now, especially if you're not able to evict them, even for non-payment of rent. So it's kind of been flipped on its head right now of how things are going, and we probably are going to see a switch back to single-family homes. Or sales are going through the roof, and we're probably going to see a lot more single-family home construction, and a lot more rehab because people are. My wife's been working at home since March, so she's jumping around from place to place in the house just because she doesn't want to be stuck in one area. So people are going to be doing a lot of rehab in their homes.
And then Christian also asked, also in relation to the pandemic, for cases going to court for code violations, have those been backlogged at all due to all the stoppages with courts?
Yeah, that has. We made sure we keep writing items for administrative hearings and court, just so people don't think that now's the time to let buildings fall into disarray. For very serious cases, the courts are available for us to go in. They're also doing Zoom court hearings now. So for the really bad areas, we are pushing ahead still full steam on those. And hopefully that's the problem with the courts too. It's like, who wants to be in the Daily Center? I mean, in my practice days, 9 o'clock, that lobby was packed. Those elevators, you were sardines, and nobody wants to be in an elevator anymore. And there's no way you can screen folks to do that. My son's a senior at Lane Tech. There's 4,200 kids at Lane, and there's no way you're going to be able to screen all those kids and 300 teachers going in and out of that building. So it's going to be challenging. I mean, just having the courts offline is a huge challenge. Like you pointed out, it's like, how do you get some of these cases to court? And then if someone doesn't have money to fix it, what do you do?
And then we have time for a couple more questions. Hannah asked, on an unrelated note, what kind of real estate development do you wish to see in Chicago, and where do you think the city needs the most TLC and help from private companies?
I like to see it spread out. Like the mayor said, it was great rebuilding the Loop. I went to law school at John Marshall, and to be honest with you, the Loop shut down at 5 o'clock in the 80s. They actually shut down every other train station was shut down because there just wasn't any activity. So to see the Loop from what it was to what it is now is fantastic. But I do think we need to grow as a city, and we need to grow outwards into the neighborhoods. I'm seeing a lot of development I live off Milwaukee Avenue. There's a ton of development inching my way up north. And I just think the city needs to keep growing, and development needs to be, the transit-oriented developments even those are turned on their head now, because now nobody wants to, the benefit of that was you were right by the L tracks. So I live by 2 L lines and 2 Metro lines, which would be perfect for a high rise, but now nobody wants to live in a high rise. So it's going to be a challenge, but it's interesting times when you find yourself and when you find a lot of innovative solutions.
And then before we wrap up, the last question I had from others was, what tips do you have for students in law school wanting to get started in government?
It's a little different when I was there, but it still helps to work on campaigns. That gets you seen by people. So that's always a good thing. Internships, which are a little harder to get now because of COVID, that's always a good line. Explore all possibilities. Work with your federal, state, county folks. It's sometimes you may work on one campaign and like I worked on Lisa Madigan's campaign and I didn't get a job with her office, but I got a job with the governor's office. So they all kind of talk to each other, and you get seen, you get known, and just keep applying for every position out there. It's like I think was it Chris Matthews, and he started out as a DC police officer. So any government job you can get, and once you're in there, then you just start moving around from there. But you got to get in to begin with. Most of the positions you guys will be looking at are called Chapman exempt, so they're not the the usual HR ones. We're highly unionized. Government's highly unionized, so it gets more and more each year. But if you can get a job in the government and do good, show that you're a problem solver, have ideas, not afraid to speak up, you'll get noticed and you'll get picked up and you'll get moved around.
Thank you very much, Matt. If we were in person, I would ask everyone to give a warm round of applause, but we'll just show our appreciation virtually for now. But thanks again. Before we break the meeting, would it be all right if I share your contact information with the rest of the club? That'd be great. And that way, if anyone has any other questions for Matt, and maybe you think of them later, you can reach out to him there. But we'll have another meeting next week, and I'll send out more information for that this weekend. But thanks again, Matt, and until next time, everyone.
Great. Thanks, everybody.